Alright guys, M-Tech Guy here, and today we're taking a look at the Little One series, the E87 130i. Now the rear brake pads are worn out, so that's what we're getting replaced today. The discs look alright, so we're leaving them alone. It's just the pads that we're getting changed out today, and this is a pretty straightforward job to get done. So I'll run through the steps required, but before we do so, we'll take a look at the parts required to get the job done. Alright, now we've got our set of new rear brake pads here. Now I've gone for the Jurid branded ones. These were OEM manufacturer for BMW along with Techstar, so these are going to be good quality pads that'll give the same performance as the factory ones, so it's worth picking up a set of Jurid, Techstar or genuine BMW ones. We're also going to need a new wear sensor. I've gone for the Boa brand here. Again, this is an OEM manufacturer, so this will be the same as what's on your vehicle when it left the factory. And then for the installation of the brake pads, also picked up some brake grease here. This is the genuine BMW stuff in the packet there, but I'm pretty sure it's just nickel paste. Normally pick up a jar of the stuff, but anyhow, this will assist with making sure the pads operate nice and quietly once they're fitted. Alright, let's take a look at the steps required to get the job done. So to start off with, we need to get under the bonnet here, and we need to gain access to the brake fluid reservoir. Now this lives under this cover here, mine being a right-hand drive car. Now if yours is left-hand drive, it's going to be over the other side. So to remove the lid, just a tab to push out the way there. And if we grab this clip over the back here, that just lifts up and out. So before we get too carried away, it is worth checking the level in the reservoir there, because once we come to install the new brake pads, of course they're going to be a lot thicker than the existing ones, and we're going to have to retract the caliper pistons, and that's going to push fluid back up into the reservoir. So if this is too full, it's going to breach the seal of the cap there and overspill into this area of the engine bay, which you don't want, because brake fluid will just eat away at your paintwork. So before you start, it is worth checking the level, and you can just reduce that level slightly if you need to using a turkey baster or a small pump. But don't go too mad, you only need to take a small amount out. And then next up, we can get the rear end of the car up in the air, up on axle stands, and get the rear wheels removed. Okay, so with the wheels removed, we're now at clear access in the wheel arch here to gain access to the caliper. So first off, we're going to remove this retaining clip here. It just pops out. And then the next step, we want to unbolt the sliding portion of the caliper, and that'll just lift out, and then we can remove the two brake pads. So these run on some slider pins, two at the back of the caliper there. So they have a plastic cap on the end. We're going to pop them off first. And we're going to take a 7mm Allen and unscrew the slider pins. There's one. There's our second pin. Now we can slide the sliding portion of the caliper away from the caliper bracket. What I like to do first is just push it from the back, just to try and compress that piston slightly, because we're going to need the extra space to get the new pads in there. There we go. That's the old pads. Just position the caliper up there out of the way. We don't want to let it hang on the brake hose, otherwise we'll end up straining the hose. What we'll do next, just go through and clean these sliding points. You get a bit of corrosion, a bit of brake dust build up, so I'm going to use some brake clean and a rag just to clean them up. If they are quite corroded, it is worth getting in there with a wire brush. Mine aren't too bad. Now if you got this far and you do find there is quite a lip on the disc there, you want to consider replacing it. You might get away with having to replace the disc every other brake pad change, and you can always measure the minimum thickness. That's there nice and clean now. So next up, we're going to take our little packet of grease and we're just going to lube up the touch points where the brake pads basically slide. So we're going to put a bit of grease on there, same at the top, and then the same at the touch points on the brake pad also. Got our packet of brake pad paste. I don't need to go nuts with this stuff. You only want a thin smear, and you just watch that you don't get it on the brake disc either. If you do, just wipe it off with some brake clean. We don't want to end up contaminating the surface of the brake pads. I'm going to do the same on the pads there. Just there and there. Same on the other end. Again, you don't want to be lathering it on there, just a thin smear. There we go. I'm also going to put a little bit on the end of the piston of the caliper there, just to eliminate any squeaks. Just watch you don't get it all over the dust boot, which I've done. And the same on the two ears of the caliper there, just on the inside edge. Put a bit of grease there. And we'll put this pad in position there. We'll grab hold of the brake caliper, insert the pad into the piston. Slide it into position. Because we retracted the piston when we removed it, there's enough room there to slide it back on. Like I said at the beginning of the video, just be aware that when you are retracting that piston, it is going to push a bit of brake fluid into the reservoir, so make sure it's not too full or it will overspill. And now we can reinstall the two slider pins. Now BMW recommend you don't grease these. Some manufacturers you do, but these ones you don't. So we'll put them in dry. Reinstall the plastic plugs in the end of the slider pins. And then put the retaining clip back in position. There we go. So that's that one complete, so we can now move on to the other side. Now this side's a little bit different. We're on the right hand side now. This one has the wear sensor for the pads. So if we undo the brake bleed cover there, just pull that one out of the pad. We need to change that because obviously it's worn with the old pads. Unclip it from the suspension arm, so we'll undo these clips. To disconnect the other end of the brake sensor line, we do need to pull back the wheel liner there, but before we do that, we'll get the pads changed on the caliper. Alright guys, so my camera decided to freeze up just as I was finishing up the video here. So apparently it doesn't like sitting in the 28 degrees C direct sunlight. Yes, thank you GoPro for that one. So there I was, blissfully unaware that my camera had frozen up, just working away, talking to myself essentially. But anyhow, to finish up, the brake pad replacement was just exactly the same as the other side, but of course you had the brake pad wear sensor on this side. Now earlier on you saw me remove it, but to disconnect it from the main wiring harness, the connector lives behind the inner wheel well trim there. Now to remove that, there's a few screws that take an 8mm socket, so there's I think 2 or 3 or 4 up the inner edge of the arch there. There's a couple underneath, and then there's a couple more at the back there, and then there's 2 plastic nuts that take a 10mm socket. So you just want to remove enough of these screws and the plastic nuts to be able to fold that back inner arch just out the way. You don't need to remove the whole arch liner. Then you'll gain access to the brake pad wear sensor connector at the back there, so it's just a case of unplugging it, plug the new one in, refit the wheel arch liner, and then just feed that sensor wire back the same route as the old one came out, clip it in position, and the actual sensor piece just clips on the inner brake pad. There's a small notch at the top side of it, so just push that in, and then before you go any further, double check the level in your brake fluid reservoir, correct the level if you need to, rear wheels back on, drop it back down onto the ground, and then because we've retracted them pistons to be able to fit the new pads, there might be a small gap there, so it is worth just pumping the brake pedal a few times just to seat the pads against the discs, and you're all good to go. Alright guys, so there we have it. That's how you go about replacing your rear brake pads on your E87 1 Series. Now if you found the video interesting or useful, don't forget to give it a like, and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW DIY content. Consider subscribing if that's your cup of tea. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.